So thank you very much for joining us, Tari. Thank you for being on my channel. I know that it's really late there in Canada at the moment and you're going to be up early in the morning. So thank you so much for making it. So I just wanted you to start with introducing yourself to everyone that is on my channel and the people that are going to watch this video so they can get like a better context of how we know each other and yeah, just a basic introduction for yourself. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tariro. Right now, I'm a student in Canada. I've been here for about a year exactly. I moved from Australia where I was living with Fazai, and I came here to do further studies.
All right, thanks for that. So obviously, the people that are watching this video, I have mentioned it before that, so this is my sister that I used to live with right here in Perth. And this is also the same sister that I have mentioned a couple of times that left Australia and moved to Canada. She's currently in Toronto at the moment, and yeah, she used to live literally right here in this household with me. So I thought this would be an interesting and cool video to make because I feel like after I made the I am moving to Canada video from Australia, I got so much backlash for people in the comment section because everyone was like, oh dude, you're making a big mistake. Like, no, don't do it. Canada is terrible. Australia is way better. And a lot of the people that were saying this stuff were people that have basically not even lived in Australia, let alone Canada as well. So I found that a bit strange because I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, look, I'm open to people's opinions. Why do you think Australia is better than Canada? Have you lived in Australia? And like a lot of them would be like, no.
Yeah.
And I'm like, have you lived in Canada? And they'll be like, no.
Exactly.
I'm like, so what are you talking about? They'll be like, oh no, I've got so many friends in Australia, this and that. I'm like, yeah, I get that. I've got so many friends in Canada and Australia too. But I think people's experiences differ individually as well. And that's what I think I wanted this video to be about. I just wanted you to just give us more insight about your experience. First and foremost, your experience here, your experience there in Toronto now, and just how it differs and whether or not you feel like you made a good decision. Like, would you ever, for example, do you regret it? Do you feel like you want to come back and so forth? So I've got a couple of questions. I did send these questions to her prior to making this video. However, this is not doctored in any way. I just sent her the questions as a look, heads up, these are the sort of questions I'm going to ask. So I might actually even ask her a few other questions as well. So just be prepared for that as well. So let's just start with, we know that you're in Toronto, right? But like, where in Canada are you staying now? Can you just give us some insight on that?
So I don't stay in the city in the heart of Toronto. I stay quite east from there. So that means that I'm far from more of the hustle and bustle. And that means I have to travel quite far to get to the city center where everything is happening. That does make things a bit hard. But in general, I live in Toronto.
So when you say I've never been to Canada, so like bear with me when I try to get an idea. So for example, where we stayed here in Perth, I still stay at the same house, by the way. We were about 20 to 25 minutes away from the Perth CBD, right? So how far away are you from, let's say, CBD Toronto, let's say?
By train, I would say 45 minutes.
Okay.
Something like that. Because if I take the bus, it's much longer. Toronto is really big, and I think the transit system is very different, a little less reliable. So
okay.
I think I live around like 30 to 40 minutes away from the city.
Okay, fair enough. The next question that I'm going to ask is, so when exactly did you move?
Oh yes, I moved in August. I started the process a few months before that, but it was really quick. I applied to colleges, and within a couple of weeks, I got an acceptance letter. And as soon as I applied, we were like ready to leave to Canada.
Yep.
And as soon as they stamped my passport, I was gone within like a couple of weeks. So I moved in August of 2022, and I had started applying like maybe May, June, somewhere there.
Okay, so can you please give us, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that will want to know, Can you please give us a backstory of your move, how you went about it, what sort of visa you're on? Because I know a lot of people would want to know that. Are you a permanent resident? Are you, how did you go about that move?
Right, I'm a student right now, full-time student. So
Yep.
when I was applying, because my industry is finance, I applied to colleges and courses that were relevant to business, finance, marketing, something that would align with the degree that I already had from Australia, just to make immigration easier. I mean, when applying to be a student, you want to have something that's in line with a degree that you already have. So I applied for a student visa after I applied to colleges, and when I received an acceptance letter, I uploaded all my documents to the Canadian government,
Yep.
and they gave me my visa. I had to submit my passport to their office so that they could give me their actual the Canadian stamp. There has to be an official stamp that depends on where you're from.
Yep.
It just really depends. They'll let you know. I did everything. It was really quick. I did everything within a couple of weeks. It was really easy. The hardest thing really was finding courses that I wanted to do. Something that was in Toronto and something that was in line with the degree that I already hold.
So you were a graduate here in Australia. So you did get your bachelor's degree here in Australia. So do you want to give us more information about this course that you did? What type of course is it? Is it a postgraduate diploma? What is it? Because from what you're saying, it sounds like the process was easy. I know that the process was easy. I'm your brother. I was here when it was happening. But I'm sure people would want to know, because what's sort of happening now is that it's getting a bit harder to sort of get into these Canadian immigration programs, because there's just so many people applying for them. So I'm sure a lot of the people will want to know, because there will be people that are in the same sort of like boat as you. You've got your sort of bachelor's degree, your first degree. Yeah, so what course is that in particular that you're doing, or that you did?
I guess I'll start with the reason why I decided to come as a student and not maybe like as, as a worker.
Okay.
I graduated during like the height of COVID. When it began, I was in my last semester. It sort of threw everyone off. People were sort of losing their jobs. The job market was sort of all over the place. It's already hard to get a job as a student, as a graduate, but the pandemic made it even more difficult. So when deciding to come to Canada, I applied to a graduate program. So it was a graduate diploma program, so that I could enhance my skills. I could maybe make myself look better as a graduate, because it was going to be difficult for me to find a job, so that, to get my foot into the industry. I decided that I would do a graduate program, and that's what I did. In Canada, I applied to a postgraduate program that is 1 year. I decided to go for a 1 year program. Typically, people go for a 2-year program because it makes the process of immigrating here permanently easier. It's more favorable to do a 2-year program, because then when you're applying for your work permit, you get more years, and that's usually what people prefer to do.
Okay, so you're calling it a graduate program. Is that equal and equivalent to a graduate diploma, is it? Or
it's pretty much equal and equivalent. The differences come in the field and how long each program is. It's usually 1 to 2 years for a graduate program or diploma.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. So what has your experience been like in Toronto so far? So you said this is now your first year, right? So I'm guessing you've basically gotten the basic gist of life in Canada, life in Toronto, and what it's like, and also how it compares to here. So what has your experience been like?
It's actually been overwhelmingly positive. I think I prefer being in Canada, because the environment and the atmosphere and the people kind of match my temperament more. I felt that Australia was a bit far off from the rest of the world. something about it felt like I couldn't really see myself living there for a long time. So far, I think the stereotype that Canadians are friendly is sort of true. Everyone here is really friendly. In terms of being a student and finding a part-time job, it's not difficult. I know a lot of my friends had like an easy time finding a part-time job. Not corporate jobs, but you as a student, if you have the time after studies, after classes, to get something part-time, and it's not very difficult. A lot of students and a lot of people that immigrate here work in these part-time roles. So far, I've been finding it really good, overwhelmingly positive. The weather is very different. Winters are like very cold because it snows. But other than that, there are a lot more people from all over the world.
Yep.
Like they say, like 1 in 4 Canadians weren't born in Canada. A lot of us immigrated here, and you see it. You very clearly see it when you're walking around, and it just feels very multicultural, very friendly, very welcoming, I think.
Thanks for that. A number of things that you mentioned in there as well that I would like to touch on a bit later on. Let me go on to my next question, which was that, so are you working? If so, is it a corporate job? And if not, how confident are you that you'll be able to find the right job given your limited experience? Because obviously, as you mentioned before, you're still basically a graduate, right?
I am working. When I came here, I applied to part-time jobs that would be very low commitment because I was going to be studying at the same time.
Yep.
I wanted to take that seriously.
Yep.
I did get a job within the first month of me being here, and I've been there since. It's just a simple part-time retail job that when you come to Canada, they value Canadian experience, and what they tell you is that you should start, if you can, from the bottom. If you get a retail job and they accept you, you should take it, because if they see that on your resume, it trumps past experience that you've had in like your home country, even if it's corporate. So they do value Canadian experience. So yes, I do have a job here. In terms of future prospects, I do see myself I wouldn't say very easily getting a corporate job, but having gained a footing in the Canadian job market at all, I do see myself getting like a corporate job very, very quickly after I graduate and after I apply to corporate positions.
So my next question is, are you happy there? That's all it comes down to, right? Are you happy there? Do you think you made a mistake? If you had the chance to come back to Australia, would you do it?
I feel like people won't I feel like on either side people won't be happy to hear it, but I wouldn't go back to Australia. Not because really of the country itself. There are like a lot of things, there are a lot of pros and cons to Toronto and to Perth.
Mm-hmm.
But what it came down to was where I was personally. I just wasn't happy in general, and I wasn't happy in Australia. And a lot of other outside factors, external factors made that difficult. When I came to Canada, it sort of forced an independence that I was looking for. And it also helped that like a lot of people here matched my temperament, I don't know how to explain it, but it felt more like I could sort of disappear into a crowd here. It didn't feel like, it felt like I could sort of fit in better. So yes, I am more happy here in Toronto, and I would not go back to Australia.
So now we come to basically the one question that everyone wants to know. Canada versus Australia. Which one is better and why? For you at least, because obviously this is going to be purely like, it's just purely going to be opinion, right? So which one is better and why for you?
Economically, I think probably Australia is better, just because Toronto is a huge city. I lived in Perth before. Here, the cost of living is insane. Cost of housing is insane. The insurance, the taxes, if you want a car, it's really expensive. and I wasn't prepared for that. Going out or being able to spend time with your friends, it's really expensive. The Toronto Transit Commission, the TTC, it's also one of those things that I think is a lot less. I think Australia does it better because here it's pretty unreliable. Public transport is not reliable, especially for how much we pay for it. That being said, and I forgot to mention the crime, but that's very obvious because Toronto is like a huge city. There's a lot of crime that happens here. I think Australia was a bit safer, and that I preferred that. But that being said, I do prefer here just because it feels that there's more room for opportunity to advance. I moved specifically because my industry was kind of dwindling in Australia. There were lots of graduates in my industry and people were moving out of Australia because there were just no future prospects for them as graduates there. And I know that Toronto, like Canada, has a huge financial district and it felt like it was the right choice to make. So moving here, I think I prefer it. I think if I had to pick and say which one is better, I would say for me personally, Toronto, just because of future prospects and the way I fit in here, the way I feel about this place emotionally and on a personal level.
I think it's important just to mention this. For those that don't know, I'm sure a lot of people will already know. So I think comparing Toronto and Perth is not exactly an apples to apples comparison. I think we should just, first and foremost, we should just set the record straight for that. Set that record straight. So Perth is a very small city in Western Australia. It's very isolated. And I guess, for example, because you mentioned crime, of course, crime in Toronto will be there'll be way more crime. It's a lot more people. A city that will probably be a bit more comparable will be a city like Sydney or Melbourne. And trust me, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the East Coast. I hear about it at work on TV every single day, like crazy crimes that you didn't even think happened in Australia. Like I was just at work the other day and we're having breakfast and we're watching CCTV footage on, I think it's 9 News Melbourne or something, and these guys basically did a home invasion and they had shotguns in Australia. And I thought, the first time I saw it, I was like, this has to be America or something. And it was literally it happened in the East Coast of Australia. So I think, if the city, bigger cities will obviously have more people, there'll be a bit more crime. So I think it's just good that we put that out there so everyone knows that when you say that there's a bit more crime there, it's probably just because the city here is just smaller in general. Perth, or the city that we lived in and you lived in, was smaller, right? I guess I'll go on to the next question, which is just give us an overview. What are the pros and cons of living in Canada?
The pros of living in Canada, I think the opportunity to network and make connections. I think it's a bit easier. Like we said, Perth is really small. I think you sort of need to know a few people who know people. In Toronto, it feels broader. It feels like everybody knows someone. It's like the community is a bit wider. You have a bit more of a span to reach other people. If you have like college professors here, you can make a connection with them, and they take that very seriously. And from there, you branch out really quickly, which you can do anywhere. But it does feel like in Canada, you can gain more opportunities here. There's always like events happening. There's always something happening that you can stumble upon by mistake. And from there, you can find opportunities. I think another pro, honestly, for me, the weather, which I think is like nobody really cares about that, but I do like that the weather, that it snows here because of all the activities that you get to do. Another pro, I think, is the wages. I think the opportunity to earn more is a bit. I think it's better in Canada. I can't be too sure, but once you get your footing in an industry, then it's very easy to quickly build up from there.
That's
It's also very close to a lot of other countries and like America. There's a chance for you to get a lot of like remote jobs. You can have jobs, you can have companies hiring you from America, and you can be working in Canada and earning in US dollars, and that's really advantageous. So that's another pro of living here, I think.
so. I'll just go back to something that you mentioned. So you're saying that the possibility of basically getting a higher wage there is better, is it? But
I think so.
you think so? Okay. So I'll go back to something that you said before, because you said that economically Australia was better. So did you want to just clarify that one to clear it out?
What I meant was when you go to Australia as a student, economically, getting a place to live, the rent, I remember we used to complain that rent was really expensive, but compared to Canada, it's like nothing. The cost of living here is just insane. And the cost of groceries, the tax on everything that you buy, everything is added afterwards after you purchase things. Economically, I think in Australia, I was used to things being priced reasonably, or rent was very reasonable. What you could get for what you paid for was very reasonable. It's really common for people here to have roommates for long periods of time because it's just really expensive to rent, one-bedroom apartments. But in terms of wages, I think you earn more faster in Canada, especially when you have a degree, or if you have if you've built up any other skills, and that's why a lot of people do graduate programs. So I guess when I say economically, I sort of just mean in terms of, what you're paying for as a student,
Yep.
The cost of living, the rent. But when it comes to what you're earning, I think you probably earn a bit more here.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because a lot of people are under the impression that Australia has the highest wages. For me, this has been a huge battle with people in the comment section, because everyone has this notion, immigrants that haven't been to Australia, haven't been to Canada. So these are probably first-time immigrants, and they're still under this notion that Australia has really high wages. This is what I keep trying to say to them, which is that Australia has a high minimum wage. So if you're working a minimum wage job, you'll be making a decent hourly rate here. What is it? I think when you were here, it was what, 20 something dollars, $21, 22 or something like that?
So
Yeah.
something like that.
So you will get that. But one thing that they forget to factor in is that at the moment, because of this crazy inflation and even just crazy inflation within the Australian economy, the Australian dollar is severely undervalued on the global market. So what that now means is that even though you're earning that $21, now of course a lot of people argue and say it doesn't matter because you earn that money in Australia and you'll be spending it in Australia, right? But I feel like for me as an immigrant, if I'm getting paid, I'm not just going to look at how much I'm getting paid relative to everyone else in Australia. I'm international. I have to look at the bigger picture, right? I have to look at how salaries in different countries in my industry, in the United States and in Africa. And I can tell you guys right now, every single job that I've seen in my industry outside of Australia pays more. That's just, it is what it is. And I'll even give an example of, so our father, he's in mining. He's been in mining for 20 to 30 years. And it's actually interesting. I was having a chat with him the other day. So throughout the years, because my dad used to work in mining, and we used to travel a lot in Africa, going to different places just for his work. And he was telling me that throughout those years, it was interesting because he actually got a lot of offers to come work in Australia. A lot of the times throughout I don't know if you remember that, but he actually got a lot of offers. It wasn't just one or two, it was a couple, probably even 4 or 5. And each time they would just give him that package and you just look at it and he was like, this is like people earn that much? Like, you're so shocked. You're like, that's it?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to be earning? Like, he's literally shocked. And he turned it down almost all the times. And interestingly enough, in a lot of those mines where my dad used to work, there were actually a lot of Australians. A lot of Australians left the Australian mining industry to go work in the African mining industry because they were getting paid more money. They were getting paid in US dollars, and you're getting way more money, which would just allow you to come back to Australia after sacrificing a good 2 to 3 years. You just come back to Australia, you buy a house cash, straight up. So I feel like we just need to clear that one off once and for all, because everyone in the comment section is always telling me Australia has high wages, Australia this and that. I'm like, it depends on what you're comparing to. Look, there are places and there are industries where yes, that could be the case, but as immigrants and as international people, we need to look at the global scale. And Australia is definitely not even close to being at the top in terms of high wages for professional jobs. Definitely not. And I've done so much research about this in the last couple of months. It doesn't even come close. United States pays way more than that. Even Canada, I've seen a lot of guys in oil and gas that get paid way more money than what we're getting here, even in mining as well. So for me, that one is just not a factor. I want to talk about cost of living. The reason why I want to talk about cost of living, you say that the cost of living there is just on a whole different level compared to here. However, I want to counter that. And what I want to say to you is there are a lot of people, so this has happened in the last couple of years, there are actually a lot of people that are moving from the east coast of Australia, so that is Melbourne, Sydney, moving to Perth just so that they're able to afford a house or, just to tone down that cost of living a little bit. Which is why I'll go back to what we mentioned before, which is that comparing Toronto and Perth is not apples to apples. I guess my next question would be, Toronto would be probably one of the most expensive cities in Canada, without a doubt, right? I think it's probably Toronto or Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
I think it would have to be.
So then another question I'll ask you is that, so we actually have a sister, for those of you that don't know on the video, that lives in Calgary. And she's in university in Calgary. And from my understanding, Calgary is cheaper. I don't know how cheaper. I didn't want to say a bit cheaper. I just know that it's cheaper. And I think Calgary will be a bit more of a apples to apples comparison with Perth. If you look at the two cities, the populations are very similar. They're both sort of backed up by a huge resource sector. So Western Australia and, Perth, massive backing from like the mining industry. And then, Alberta is backed up by, a massive resource sector in the form of oil, right? The oil sands. So when you say the cost of living, do you mean the whole of Canada in its entirety, or are there places where that cost of living, you can sort of stretch your dollar a bit more? For example, if you move to a different province or, and so forth.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's pretty much mostly Toronto where the cost of living is insane. A lot of people, even in Toronto, have been considering moving to places like Alberta and Calgary. Alberta is like a state that's been asking a lot of people to move there because I think it's been facing, I think it's a pretty empty state. They're looking for people to move there. And the reason why people don't live in, places like Alberta is because of the extreme weather. It's just the winters are very cold, and sometimes people would prefer to sort of endure the high cost of living in Toronto because at least it's bearable. So there are lots of places to live in Canada, but a large majority of Canada, you can't live on the continent. You can't live in most of the north of Canada because it's just way too cold. Nobody really lives there. A lot of people live closer to the US border. So Toronto is like hugely populated, and it's just really popular to stay there. I honestly would consider moving to Alberta, and probably will in the future. If I can imagine myself in the future, it would probably be there because I've heard that it's more affordable. The rent is way more affordable, and the cost of living is just a bit more reasonable than in Toronto. So there are places in Canada that are affordable.
Yes.
I only know Alberta because, like you said, our sister is there. But I don't know about the other states, but I for sure know that Toronto is definitely like the biggest culprit in
Cost of living.
expensive cost of living, yeah.
Okay, so I guess my next question would be, this is probably just one of our closing questions, is where do you see yourself in 5 years? I heard you mentioning Calgary and Alberta. So where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I definitely see myself moving closer to Alberta, to Calgary, just because I don't know how sustainable it would be to stay in Toronto. It's looking bleak to like a lot of people that live here. Even Canadians themselves are very cynical about staying in the state. They're just weighed down by how expensive everything is, and you hear it every day in the news. But the cost of housing, and people don't really see themselves being homeowners in the future, and the only way they're seeing that in their future is to move to other states. I think in the long run, I see myself moving to Alberta. I see myself staying in Canada, but moving to a different state. And at that point, I also see myself having already established a career in finance. So that's probably where I'll see myself in 5 years.
I just wanted to just add in there a little question just that I wanted for my own personal gain. I just wanted to know, so I heard you mention that Alberta seems to have more extreme weather. So how much does it differ? Because I thought that winter was just a constant throughout the whole country. Do some states have worse winters provinces, have worse winters compared to others?
Definitely, yeah, they definitely do. From what I've heard specifically about that state, the winters are very brutal. I think Toronto's winters are a bit more easy to manage. We kind of have a couple of storms, a couple of days of storms. Before I came to Canada, we experienced like a few inches of snow that reached up to people's knees. But when I was here, my first winter was pretty tame, as people explained, that we've experienced like worse winters before. But when I was listening to people talk about the winters in Alberta, they were talking about how it's very normal for them to experience days on end where there are, snowstorms and days when you can't come into class or to work. Mm-hmm. We only had one day like that last year, and there are definitely other states where the winters are just really brutal. It gets to minus 40 degrees, and that's just normal for them. So I think Toronto is more bearable when it comes to winters, and that's saying something because it gets really cold here also.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned minus 40 in Alberta. So in for example, this past year that you spent in Toronto, what's the coldest that it's been?
I can't remember what the coldest we experienced was, but I do remember seeing minus 25 degrees, something like that. Mm-hmm. Nothing close to minus 40, I don't think. I don't think we experienced anything that close to minus 40. Okay. Probably in closer to the north, the state of Ontario in general, but Toronto, that very concentrated area closer to the border, I don't think we experienced winter that cold.
All right. I guess last question. Sorry, I'm overburdening you with questions. I'm sure you want to go to sleep now. But so you mentioned something about just the multiculturalism, and I just wanted to reintroduce this conversation just so that we could get more clarity and just set the record straight once and for all. So being here in Australia, there are a lot of immigrants. There are a lot of second and some even third generation immigrants as well. And so I just wanted you to clarify, when you say that, like, you feel like it's more multicultural, in what way? Because I feel like here in Perth now, we look, there is quite a relatively big immigrant family in Perth. And I've also traveled to the East Coast and I've seen similar as well. So I just wanted you to just clarify that and how it like really differs when you say it's more multicultural.
Well, with Australia, I think the barrier to entry is a bit higher. The visas are more expensive, and that means only a certain um, a number of immigrants come in or are able to, move there at all.
Yep.
And I think a large number of people that migrate to Australia come from like Asia and Africa.
Yep.
Those people sort of migrate there the most. But because of where Canada is located, a larger population of the planet sort of migrates there. So there are a lot of people, not only from East Asia, but from South Asia. There's a lot of people from India, a lot of people from all over Africa. I think when I was in Australia, there were a lot of people from Southern Africa.
Yep.
There were also lots of Nigerians. But here, I see a lot of people from all over the planet, everywhere. There's a lot of Indonesians and Filipino students, a lot of people from China, just a lot of people plucked from like every end of the planet. I think Australia, people migrate there because of proximity. If you're kind of closer to that side of the planet, then you would probably consider moving to Australia. And then you would also have to consider how expensive it is just to apply to get there. Canada, the visa process is a bit easier.
Yep.
It's much cheaper. It's like a fraction of the price in comparison.
Yep.
So I think that's why there's a lot of people there. I think there's also a large percentage of the population are immigrants that have been here for like decades.
Yep.
And people that have brought family into the country. Australia felt more like a very young immigrant population to me.
Yep.
But that could have just been because I'm also young and I was around people my age. Here it feels like
No, I think I definitely agree with you on that one. Just as mentioned before, just being, global citizens and citizens of the world. I think one of my observations, I think growing up, we used to travel a lot, So you go to different places, you learn different things. And one of my observations with Australia, this is just my opinion, was that I think immigration is still a relatively new thing. They're still young migrants, but the sort of like second generations and third generations are very few of them. And the very few that have done that are mostly sort of like refugees, people that didn't really have any options. It was more just like, look, we just need to go anywhere.
yeah, exactly.
So whatever place takes us, we'll go there. And then I look at places like Canada because I've got lots of friends there, and you actually see some, immigrants, some of them borderline getting onto second generations that have moved there out of choice. So actually, they've literally just left their home country and moved to Canada. Yeah, I find that pretty interesting as well. Yeah. So I definitely agree when you say it's a lot harder. And look, I mean, we're both students here. And one of the biggest factors was just tuition fees, and Australian tuition fees is ridiculous. If you look at what we paid for our degrees, it is insane. And you look at what you pay for pretty much the same quality of education, if not even better. I know that Canada has a lot of universities that rank a lot higher than a lot of the Australian universities. You pay a fraction of the cost, so I guess you just sort of have to weigh that in. Overall, this is what I think. I think Canada gives off a friendlier, more family-friendly, family-oriented immigration program. An immigration program that basically is more inviting to immigrants, because I know that now with both of you being there, as soon as you guys get your PR, it's almost, an instant given that, if I wanted to pursue that through you guys, that'll be easy. If mom and dad wanted to pursue that through you guys, that'll be very easy. Whereas here in Australia, I think it's important that we mention this so people actually know the facts. So I got my permanent residency while you were still here and you're on your student visa. And do you want to let everyone know what the immigration agents, so that's plural, it wasn't just one immigration agent, told you in terms of whether or not I could help you with that transition to permanent residency? So I'll just let you answer that one.
Yeah, they told me that there was no real way to get permanent residence through you, even though you got yours approved. I still don't know if that's true or how other people have done it in the past, or maybe it's like a policy that changed. But it's very different in Canada. For a lot of people, as soon as they have permanent residence, you can immediately apply for dependents or for other people to come in. So it was very different. I was told that there was no way to get permanent residence through you.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically how it happened, guys. I had my PR. We consulted with a couple of immigration agents, and apparently that's just not possible in Australia anymore. I was just talking to one of my work colleagues the other day. He is now a citizen here in Australia, and he's planning to bring his family here. His parents, sorry, and his parents are a bit of elderly age, and he basically came to two options when it came to getting his parents those visas. So one of the visas has a wait time of, I believe, 39 years.
I think I heard something. It's a lot of time.
It's a lot of years. So one of the visas is 39 years. That visa is more affordable, but then the average processing time is about 39 years. If I'm wrong, please someone correct me in the comments, but I believe it was something like that. And then the second option that he has is he can pay basically $50,000 for a visa for each parent. So it wasn't exactly 50,000. I think it was about 48,000 or something like that. So he would have to pay basically 100,000 Australian dollars to basically get his parents' citizenship. And that's the quickest one. That's the one that will be processed in a few years, and they'll be able to come straight direct here. So this is just to give people an idea of, if you're coming to Australia and you're planning to get here and then, get the ball rolling on bringing your family with you at some point, these are just some of the hurdles that you need to know, because here we give you all the facts, guys. We're not sugarcoating anything. As you can see, my sister is in Toronto right now. She was right here in this very house. We lived in this very house together. I had permanent residency. She did not. And actually, you weren't even working at the time. So you could have easily hopped on as a dependent for me, but it just wasn't going. Apparently, that just wasn't an option. And it wasn't an option anymore.
There are also rules about if you want to apply as a worker or do permanent residence, you need to be working within your field.
Yep.
And then there's like a limit to how many people they accept within that field. And
yep.
It depends on what you're doing, what career you're in.
True. So I just want to close off by saying thank you very much for joining us today. And I know that was a very long video, and I know you really need to get some sleep. So I'll just sort of like wrap it up really quickly. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for giving us this insight. I'm really happy that you've given us this insight, because with me, for example, I had this perception of Canada because I've never been to Canada. So I think for me, when I made the I'm moving to Canada video, I think a lot of people in the comment section also had that sort of like attitude towards my video as well, because they're like, why would you do that? You've never even been to Canada. So thank you very much for just giving us this insight and letting us know, just basically what it is. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. All I want to say is it honestly depends. Everyone's experience is going to be different. I had friends in Australia that had a very easy time after graduating, finding jobs and settling down. And that's because their personalities take to being in Australia better than mine did. So honestly, it just depends. At the end of the day, you're sort of responsible for your own decision when it comes to where you want to go. But we have videos like this to make informed decisions. So.
Exactly. And this is why we make videos like this for you guys that haven't been to Australia, and for you guys that haven't been to Canada. This is why I make these videos, to help you guys make an informed decision. We're not trying to bias anything. I'm not pro-Canada, anti-Australia. I've been in Australia for 10 years. Australia is an amazing place to live, but we have to give you the facts like they are. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a good night.
Thank you. It was nice being here.
So there you have it, guys. So that is full insight from a person, my very own sister that used to live with me right here in this household. She moved from here in Australia to Canada. She's been living there for a year, and that's been her experience. Obviously, your mileage will vary. Not everyone's experience will be exactly the same, but the reason why I make these videos is just to give you guys insight, to open up your minds, and to give you information that you may not or may have had before, and just to help you make a more informed decision, right? That's what this is all about. We help each other. We're all immigrants, right? We help each other get through these things and just help each other make better decisions, basically. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. If there are other questions that you guys wanted me to ask, let me know in the comments section, and we can perhaps arrange to do another video at a later time. If you guys want me to do another video with my other sister that's in Calgary, maybe that might be a better video in terms of comparing apples to apples with Perth and Calgary. Let me know in the comments section if you want me to do that. And yeah, thanks for joining us. I'll catch you guys in the next one.